I'm Ken Rockwell with KenRockwell.com, live here on KenRockwell.tv. Let's take a look at tips and tricks and secrets of the Canon 1DX Mark III. First, let's cover batteries and power. The batteries are these big things here. Flip that down, rotate it, take this out. These rascals do not charge via USB. They only charge in this monster charger. They slap in like this, and it's a beautiful charger. You've actually got charge status lights. This big charger plugs in the wall with a cord. Get a cord like this, a little figure of 8 non-polarized output onto there, at least in the United States. Here's the reading on the back of the charger if you guys care. The beauty of this charger is it also can calibrate and cycle the batteries if you press the cal button. If you put in 2 batteries, it'll charge the one, then charge the next one. So after you're shooting a job, as if you could ever wear these batteries out in a day, you put them both in, and the next morning they'll both be fresh and ready to go. Viewfinder adjustment. This will probably be obvious because when you get your new camera, it ships with this eye cup not attached. And you may wonder why, because every other camera in the world comes with it attached. But here's the deal. The dioptometric adjuster is actually hidden under the eye cup. So you want to adjust it and then slide your eye cup on. To pull the eye cup off, and this is a standard eye cup used across most of the Canon range, press in here, lift up straight. There's also an eyepiece blind, this little lever here. If your head's not here and light can sneak into the back, do that. The meters will not be tricked. The magic finger control works by magic. If you're using it for playback and you zoom into your image, it just reads your finger and it's all good. If you're trying to set the autofocus area, it won't respond unless you first hit the autofocus area selector button to wake up the AF system, and then you can slide around and select your autofocus area. The key is you have to get the selection mode active. It won't just always be responsive. For manual focus, you do have to pre-select the one manual focus area the same way you select an autofocus area, and then the finder will blink in red as you focus. It'll blink as soon as you get perfect focus. Of course, there's also a green dot on the bottom. The C1, C2, and C3 modes, I love these. I program my mother function button, and I'll cover that, to select among the various exposure modes. C1, C2, C3, you can program them as you want. I program C1 for general use. I program C2 the same, except that I use it for outdoor use. So I expect contrasty light, so I select -2/3 of a stop exposure compensation. And I set the rear LCD brightness for full. For C3, I use that for use on a tripod, so that's the aperture preferred mode. I include the self-timer, and I set it to F8 by default and force the ISO down to 100, as well as a bunch of other things, but we're all different. To set any of these, first set your camera as you want it saved, and then go into Menu, Wrench 4, and usually you can hit the Q button to go between the various categories of menu. So there's the wrench, page 4, Custom Shooting Mode. And now you can save the settings. The current setting of the camera is what it'll save to any place you want to. Another trick is Auto Update Set. If you set Auto Update Set, when you first get your camera, if you enable that, any change you make will be saved into the C1, C2, or C3 mode that you are currently using. When you get those set the way you want them, you set that to disable, so as you make any weird settings, when you go back to that same C1, C2, or C3 mode, it'll be back to the way you programmed it to begin with. What's really weird is, when I first got this camera, I was confused. I couldn't get C2 mode to recall for the life of me. It would just select C1. There's a trick for some bizarre reason, and I disagree with Canon's thought on this, but if you go to Menu, Custom 3, in other words, Custom Page 3, Restrict Shooting Modes, I kid you not, by default, the camera comes from Japan with C2 and C3 deactivated. So make sure to go in here and activate these if you want to use them. Otherwise, you'll never see them come up in your menu to select them. The way you normally select modes is you press Mode and then turn this or the rear ring, and you can select among all the modes. To let our mother function button select among the modes, I go to Menu, Custom Page 6, and then Custom Controls, and then here's where you set the mother function button. In this case, I set it to C, so that I select the C modes by pressing the mother function button. In order to be able to see what mode I'm in the viewfinder, and they'll appear as little black LCD markers in the bottom left of the active area on the ground glass. For that, we go to Menu, Wrench Page 2, Viewfinder Display. And here, under Show, Hide, and Viewfinder, among the many options, these are things that we can choose to show or not to show in the viewfinder. The more you select, the more you'll see, but also the more junk will be in your finder. To be honest, Canon did a great job. And even when you have all these turned on, none of them are really that distracting from getting a good composition. And also, this is a camera historically used in news and action, where a little bit of schmutz down at the bottom of indicators won't really get in the way of you making your picture. If you're doing fine art on a tripod, then maybe you want a cleaner display so you can think more clearly. But honestly, it's all personal preference. Do what you want. To save and recall your settings from a card. In other words, and also the card door switch is here. And there's the card door. It only takes CF Express, so forget using SD or CF cards or XQD cards. Not going to work. XQD cards will fit, but they won't be read. To save everything about your camera to a card, we go to Menu, Wrench 4, Save Load Camera Settings to Card. And now we can save these to the card or load them back from the card if we have a card that has a file on it. And if you put your card reader on your computer, you can store and recall from your computer or email them to your friends. And that is useful for if you have a fleet of cameras to deploy all with the same settings, or if you loan out your camera, or if you send it out for service, you can restore all your settings and be sure that your camera came back exactly as you wanted it to. The clocks can set themselves to the GPS. There's a GPS built into this. To do that, we go to Menu, we go to the purple snake icon. That's what I call it. GPS settings, GPS, and make sure the GPS is turned on, which is either mode 1 or mode 2. And auto time setting, auto update. That's important to me because I oftentimes shoot multiple cameras at any given shoot. And this way, when I get them all back, I can sort them in Camera Bits Photo Mechanic, and I can simply sort them by time. And this way, all the similar shots taken at the same time sort together instead of them all sort differently. There's a shutter counter new to this model, and that is in Menu Wrench 5. And it's called System Status Display, and hidden in there is the camera serial number, the firmware version, and the number of cycles to within about the nearest 1,000. For image downloads, the best thing is to just go out and buy a CF Express card reader. The problem is those things are $100 a piece, and admittedly, after spending $6,500 for a camera, I don't want to have to buy new cards. But here's the deal. Actually, when I got my camera from B&H, it actually came as part of a promotional package with a card and a card reader. So that saved me about $300. God bless them. In any case, you can definitely get your images back from a card, at least on my Apple Macintosh computer. I simply use a USB-C cord, and then I use the Apple Image Capture program, which is in every Macintosh. And to get that to work, you've got to have the camera turned on and wake it up. And then it should just show up as a device in Apple's Image Capture, and then you can drag and drop from there into your Finder, and you're good to go. The camera won't show up simply as a storage device as it would from a card reader. And that's it. Those are just a few short little tricks and tips that I use. But hey, there's another one. Might as well cover this too. Honestly, this works with any of the Canon EF lenses. It won't work with the RF lenses because there's too much room between the lens mount and the sensor. But every EF lens made since 1987 is going to work flawlessly. And one of my favorites, $6,500 camera. This lens you can buy used for about $100. It's the 28-135. The digital lens optimizer built into the 1DX Mark III now, which is new with the Mark III, compensates these older plastic lenses. In the old days, Canon used to make full-frame lenses for consumers that were maybe $200 or $300 a piece that worked reasonably well. They weren't made to take a beating like the L lenses, but they still work. Many people have forgotten them. But these make really magnificent images on the 1DX Mark III now because it compensates for what few optical aberrations may have been in these lenses. And I'll be honest, although I own all the L lenses, my 24-70 f2.8 I love to death, but it only goes to 70 millimeters. So if I don't need 2.8, I usually bring this lens, which adds image stabilization and goes twice as far, all the way out to 135 millimeters, and oftentimes lets me get the shot without having to shift my lenses. If you find these free videos helpful, of course you can subscribe, but the biggest support to me to take time out of my day to do this and do my website at kenrockwell.com, where all this is written down in much more detail, is when you use my links to my favorite stores to get stuff. Honestly, I've used these stores, most of them, since the 1970s when I was a little kid. Adorama, B&H, and Crutchfield I've been using since the 70s. I got this from B&H. I love those guys. They really take our interests at heart. The other camera stores in New York back in the 70s, there were so many of them. Most of them were so awful, and they've all been forgotten about. The reason B&H continues to get so much larger is they really care about us. They take care of us. They consider our long-term best interests. So by all means, that's why I recommend them so highly. I have links to them in the description of this video, as well as at my website. And please, if you're going to get stuff, use those links when you get your stuff, and that is the biggest source of support to me to be able to continue to offer all these services and show you how to use this stuff and help you guys out. Again, thanks again for watching me, Ken Rockwell, here on kenrockwell.tv. I'll see you at kenrockwell.com, and I'll see you in the next video.